Okay, so at the time that I'm recording this, it is officially the day before the Fantastic Four officially comes out, but I have already seen the Fantastic Four. I've been working on this little script and I want to talk about it. This is probably going to be one of the most rambling videos I've ever had and one of the longest videos that I've ever had. I really want to break down all the merchandise, or most of it, and really talk about how they promoted this movie. I want to talk about it comparatively to other movies in the MCU as well as other movies in the recent phases. I want to talk about what we could see in the future of the MCU with these characters. I want to talk about this movie, the entire plot pretty much. I will be spoiling everything, so this is kind of your warning. There will be a ton of spoilers in this video. I also want to talk about this movie compared to Superman. Superman was another movie that's kind of competing with it. I've also seen it, so I want to talk about what was good with each one. And just overall, I want to talk about this movie because the Fantastic Four is something that I really, really enjoy. The Fantastic Four are characters that I've really liked since I was a little kid. I liked the 2005 movies well enough. I wasn't a huge fan of Fan Four Stick, but overall, these are characters who I've read thousands of comics of, and I really, really enjoy. And I'm really excited that other people are kind of getting to see them in the way I see them, because that's something that I've never really felt before. I've always felt like the Fantastic Four were kind of the joke of the Marvel Universe, but finally, it seems like they have a decent role in the MCU, as well as having Marvel Rivals coming out recently, where they are a great addition to that game. I don't play Marvel Rivals a ton, but I've played a few matches, and when I do, I typically play as the Fantastic Four or Jeff the Shark. But either way, I want to get into this video, but this is a final warning for spoilers, but I hope you enjoy it. I do think it's important to note that the entire script for this video was written when I had only seen the movie one time on the Thursday night kind of early premiere that my theater did. So after watching this movie more times, some of my opinions might change, and if they do in the future, I might make another video. Let me know if you'd be interested. Okay, so the layout of this video is going to be a little bit different than most of my other videos. I'm going to kind of divide it into different individual sections, but for this first section, for anyone who's just kind of checking out this video, maybe isn't going to watch the whole thing until after they've seen the movie, I'm going to give a really quick non-spoiler review, and then later in the video, probably more towards the end, I'm going to do a huge spoiler section where I talk about all the spoilers of the movie. But either way, I just want to say, very short and sweet, it's a very, very good movie. The characters are all very well cast, and they feel, for the most part, exactly like they do in the comics. Now, one thing I will note, I'm pretty sure the trailers and everything's kind of hinted at this. This might be considered a light spoiler, but it's nothing too crazy. But because the movie takes place quite a few years into them already being the Fantastic Four, we don't really get to see a lot of the interesting early storylines. So we don't get to see a lot of Thing dealing with the fact that he's been turned into the Thing. He's kind of already moved past a lot of the sadness that comes with that. And with Johnny, he's already kind of matured past a lot of his like more hot-headed era, and he's more into kind of a more mature, ready to settle down era. And that's kind of not maybe necessarily what everybody wants to see, but I did enjoy, especially with Johnny, what they did with his character. I really, really enjoyed Johnny in this movie, and that's interesting because Johnny's not typically one of my favorite members of the team. Normally, I prefer Reed and the Thing, and yes, both Reed and the Thing are great in this film, but I really did enjoy the stuff they did with Johnny, and it kind of makes me excited to see what this Johnny could do in the future, maybe even teaming up with Spider-Man or something along down the line. Either way, I really, really enjoyed what they did here. I think the characters are all great. I didn't even mention Susan Storm. Susan Storm is by far, probably, even looking into the comics, the best version of Susan Storm that I've ever seen. I don't really think there is another version that is as good as this one is. She does a really, really good job. And other than that, I can't say too much else because I'll be getting into spoilers, but I really, really did enjoy this movie. I recommend it, and if I was to kind of give a rating to it, I've been saying it's a 9 out of 10 for me. I don't think it's as perfect. I think a 10 out of 10 for me when it comes to Marvel movies would be Avengers Infinity War, and I don't think this is quite as good as Avengers Infinity War, but it does give me a lot of the same feelings. Avengers Infinity War is really, really good with pacing. I feel like it never slows down, but it also doesn't feel like it's going too fast. This movie does the exact same thing, and there's this feeling of dread throughout the whole movie that I also get with Infinity War. So it's a very, very good movie. It makes me feel a lot of things, which is always good when a movie's able to do that. So yes, very good movie. Highly recommend it. Let's go ahead and move on over to the next section. So let's talk about the merch that kind of came out to go along with this movie. So I bought a lot of the merch, and I'm going to show some of it off in this video. I've bought different things at different points in time, so some of this footage will be a lot more well put together. You'll see like my backdrop and stuff like that in it, but some of it's just going to be random stuff that I bought. So first of all, there was like a collection of cereal that they made. I have a couple boxes here that I can show you. Different characters were just shown on the box, and on the back there was like a little puzzle, a little game. One of my personal favorite collabs that they did with this was they had Pop-Tarts with characters printed on the Pop-Tarts. I thought that was really cool. They also brought back a flavor that apparently was like forgotten about. We have Snapple bottles. I had never had Snapple until these. They're all right. Along with that, there was some obviously there's a lot of Funko products. These are some of the little figures I got. I actually did not buy any Funko Pops for this movie. I own a lot of the comic versions of the Funko Pop characters, but I don't have any of the new ones. Truthfully, just because the MCU changes suits a lot, and I don't really want to keep rebuying more characters. Yeah, there's also a Lego set, which I did get. Thought the Lego set was pretty cool. And then there's this like prequel comic, which we'll talk about that in another section, but I just kind of wanted to show off some of the merchandise. Little Caesars did a collab. Here's some of the pizza boxes and what they looked like, but overall really cool. So yeah, now there are some other merchandise things that I actually was not able to get my hands on, but there's not a ton of it. Most of it I didn't get just because I either wasn't interested in it, or I'm going to get it in the future, or it's just something that I didn't really purchase. Like, there were a ton of popcorn buckets. I personally don't buy popcorn buckets when I go to the movies. It's just not something I'm interested in, but they did have a couple cool, interesting designs. For me personally, I really liked the Herbie one. I came real close to getting it, but I ended up not getting it. Along with that, there was like some statues. I'm probably going to get one of these at some point in the future. I just haven't made the purchase yet. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to show off a few of these. I'm sure there's other stuff that I'm missing. There was like some Marvel Legends figures. I don't buy any Marvel Legends, but they did exist. So if that's something you're into, they were available. Now, obviously, just like with any modern movie that comes out, especially movies that are in some way connected to Disney, there are some virtual, like, video game kind of collabs and crossovers. So I want to talk about a few of those as well. We had the Fortnite collab, because everything is in Fortnite. I've played like maybe 3 games of Fortnite my entire life, but they do have the Fantastic Four as skins. Along with that, they also have the Lego Fantastic Four, which that's exciting to see. These are characters who we haven't really seen other than like the one set they've released, but we haven't really seen them since the old Lego Marvel Superheroes game, so it is cool to see them back. And then along with that, obviously they are all, it's not really connected to the movie. I think they have like maybe a alternate costume based on the movie, but Marvel Rivals does have the Fantastic Four, and they're really cool to see in there as well. Not a lot to say in this section, but I did want to go ahead and mention, yes, the Fantastic Four did get featured in Fortnite. Okay, I'm going to kind of keep this section brief, but obviously Fantastic Four First Steps was not the only superhero movie to come out this month. We also did get Happy Gilmore 2. Obviously, that was a joke. The other movie that we got was Superman, which was a really good film. I'm a huge fan of the James Gunn films, and it was really good. I love what they did. As someone who does not follow DC nearly as close as I do Marvel, I know very little DC unless it involves like Batman. But there's one character that I've never really been that interested in, and that's Green Lantern. And admittedly, this film kind of got me interested in Green Lantern. Also, Mr. Terrific was really cool, but you've seen that all over the internet. He was one of the best parts of the film. I really liked Hawk Girl. Honestly, it was a really good film, but now that I have seen Fantastic Four First Steps, I will say I did kind of prefer it a little bit, but they did have the advantage of, first of all, my extreme bias of these being characters that I already loved going in, and Superman honestly being one of my least favorite characters in superhero fiction. But I do like the movie, I must admit. It's definitely the best Superman movie that I've ever seen, but I did just kind of want to throw this in here somewhere. Oh yeah, I almost didn't mention Krypto's in this movie. Krypto's great. Just James Gunn does such a good job. But either way, Fantastic Four First Steps, yes, I did prefer it a little bit, but I would be interested to see which one you guys preferred in the comments below. Oh yeah, one last note. If you didn't already know, the Fantastic Four and Superman have met before in the comics. I do know that as someone who as I've mentioned plenty of times in this video, as a huge fan of the Fantastic Four, I do know about that storyline. So I'm just throwing it out there. You know, Kevin Feige and James Gunn have worked together in the past, and this could make a really interesting film at some point. I know it's probably not going to happen, but I don't know. I can dream. Okay, I think it's fair to say that since Avengers Endgame, people have kind of had mixed feelings about a lot of Marvel's releases. Some of them people have really enjoyed, like Deadpool and Wolverine or Spider-Man No Way Home, or even Thunderbolts, but there's also some films people didn't like as much, like Eternals and Thor Love and Thunder and Eternals. So with that being said, I kind of wanted to break down how I think they could have fixed this, and I think there's a few things that they did wrong. And yes, I know you're probably wondering, how does this connect to the Fantastic Four? Don't worry, we'll get there. So I think one of the biggest problems they made is, unlike the earlier Infinity Saga films, that we didn't have a clear group to focus on. See, in the earlier films, it was always Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America, and if it wasn't one of these three characters as the main protagonist of the film, the character that was the main protagonist in some way connected to them. For example, Black Panther had clear connections with Captain America, with the vibranium, and we had connections between Spider-Man and Iron Man. We had connections between Doctor Strange and Iron Man. I know they're a little bit smaller, but we did have connections there. We also had Thor showing up in Doctor Strange, which was a much clearer connection. So all these films kind of connected, and with that, I think we needed something similar in the Multiverse Saga, and I think the only clear option was the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four should have been at the very start of Phase 4, through Phase 5, through Phase 6. Not only because these are characters who I think could handle the science side of a multiverse storyline, but they're also characters who connect so many characters that have been brought up in the Multiverse Saga. For example, these Super Skrulls are clear characters that connect to the Fantastic Four. The High Evolutionary is a Fantastic Four villain. Agatha, all of these characters are important to the Fantastic Four's history, so it's kind of weird that all of them made appearances in the MCU way before the Fantastic Four. With that being said though, I am excited to see where they go in the future with these characters, because frankly at this point I kind of think it's important that the Fantastic Four stay at least somewhat close to the center of the story going forward. Obviously we have Doomsday. Doctor Doom is kind of known for being a Fantastic Four villain. We need to really focus on this. Alright, let's talk really quick about the prequel comic before we get into the main spoiler-filled review of the film. So yeah, they did release a prequel comic book. I haven't seen them do this a lot. I know they have done it some in the past. The only prequel comic that I'm super familiar with is for the Spider-Man 2 video game a few years back, or maybe like a year back, maybe 2 years back. At some point, somewhat recently, they released the Spider-Man prequel comic that kind of set up how he became a teacher, which didn't play a huge role in the film. I will say, even though the prequel comic for the Fantastic Four First Steps didn't do a ton to set up stuff, it did do maybe a little bit more than that comic book did. It set up a lot to do with Mole Man and kind of Mole Man's relationship with the Fantastic Four, and yeah, it did kind of play a part in the movie, although I think you could completely skip this comic and it would be fine. I think the most interesting thing this comic does, or maybe two most interesting things, is one thing is it has a really cool cover art that kind of is homage back to the original Fantastic Four comic book, which is kind of cool. And also it was the first time that we saw the Mole Man and what he was going to look like in the film. Up until this, we didn't really know, so it was kind of our first look, which was interesting. With that being said, there isn't a ton to the prequel comic, but I would feel weird if I didn't mention the fact, because I did go out and read it, just to kind of say, yes, there was a little bit more to this story, and if you really enjoyed the movie and you want some more content based on it, that would be a great place to start looking. Okay, so now let's get into the actual spoiler review. So there is quite a few things that I want to talk about. First of all, we'll just go ahead and start very early on in the movie. The opening montage is really cool. I really enjoyed seeing all the different villains. I love the fact that every villain they kind of mention is a character who has their own stories in the comics, most of which are characters that I really enjoy. Like Mole Man was really cool to see. I did like the fact, this is a few minutes later into the film, but I did like that they mentioned Latveria. They didn't really directly mention it, but it was cool to see the little plate that mentioned Latveria. That was really cool. And then just seeing the original comic book cover recreated is something that I really enjoyed. They did that in the prequel comic as well, but I did enjoy seeing it in the actual film. This is something that just kind of comes naturally with the Fantastic Four, but it was really cool to see them using their powers in non-action ways, seeing like Reed, whenever he would go to reach for something, seeing his arm would stretch, or seeing like when the power went out, or when they like were conserving power in the world was like when the world was like shutting down their power. It was cool to see that like Johnny was using his flames as like a light or like a torch. That was really cool to see. I really enjoyed seeing that because that's not something we see a ton of in the MCU, especially more lately. So I did enjoy that. Another scene that I have to highlight and mention is the space chase where the Silver Surfer was chasing them through space. All of that was really intense and really, really cool to see. Obviously, after that scene, Franklin became part of the movie, which is a character we haven't seen in live action. Franklin is not a character who I necessarily really, really like in the comics. I don't really like Reed and Susan's kids when the stories focus on them as much, which is kind of funny because the most recent Ryan North run, I really liked the things like adopted children a lot more, so I hope maybe we get to see them in the future of the MCU. But either way, Franklin showed up, and I actually really liked the way they handled him in this movie. He didn't do a lot because he did stay a baby for most of the film, but it was interesting to see him as kind of a part of the story and what they ended up doing with him. One scene that I really, really enjoyed was when Reed and Ben Grimm were having a conversation. He said something along the lines of like, "You're not as smart as you think you are," and he kind of listed some things that Reed isn't necessarily good at, but it was the way I word it doesn't make it quite as interesting as it was, but it was a really, really good scene that really was the only scene where we got to feel real guilt in Reed. Something that I really like about the character of Reed is he does allow a lot of his mistakes to really weigh him down, but ultimately he figures out solutions, or at least tries to, which is something that I really like about him, and this was the only scene that really, really focused on that in this film. Outside of that, I liked that a huge part of the plot of this movie was the trolley problem, like the ethical trolley problem. That was really interesting to see, kind of how the people turned on them over the decision that they made. I really like any time in the movie that we understand what Reed is thinking without him actually saying it. There's quite a few times in this movie where just based on, like, the film lays out the entire problem and allows you as an audience member to figure out the solution before we find out what Reed is thinking, which I really like that. I think it leads to a couple really cool moments. Along with that, the scene where Johnny translates the Silver Surfer's language and like reveals that he's officially done it, I think that's a really, really cool scene. Probably one of my favorite scenes in the film. Along with that, Galactus is really cool. It's a character I've always liked in the comics, and I never really thought we would see a movie do it well, and we finally did. And the last thing I'll really, really say in the spoiler review section of the video is the post-credit scene is kind of overhyped for this movie. It's not a bad post-credit scene, but it's been a while since there's been a really, really good one. In my opinion, I kind of liked the one in Thunderbolts alright, but even now I don't think it's aged that well. And yeah, it was cool to see Doctor Doom, but we didn't really see Doctor Doom. And I would have rather them just thrown a scene that's already finished from Doomsday into this movie than do what they did, which maybe this is a scene from Doomsday, but if that is the case, it would have been cool to get to, even if it's him wearing the mask and it's not really Robert Downey Jr., it would have been cool to see a little bit more than what we got. Okay, so I kind of want to wrap up this video here at the end by just really talking about what I would like to see for the future of these characters, some storylines that I would like to see. First of all, I think one of the big ones, Spider-Man has got to cross over with these characters, and he has got to wear one of my personal favorite suits of Spider-Man, the Future Foundation suit. I really, really hope that happens at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later. Along with that, I really like storylines where Spider-Man and the Human Torch are roommates. The Hickman run, I think, did a really good job of that, so that is something I really hope we get to see. There's a couple scenes that I would like to see play out. For example, the one where Franklin Richards is having a conversation about Johnny Storm with Spider-Man. That was a really cool scene, and I hope we get to see something kind of like that. Obviously, at some point in the MCU, we need to see the Hulk and the Thing finally go head-to-head and fight. I think that would be a really interesting scene, and it's always cool when it happens in the comics or like the animated TV show, so it's something that I think would be really cool in the movies, and I think a lot of people would want to see that moment. But even if not, there's some other things that I would also like to see. I would really like to see some kind of variation of the Maker. I know everyone kind of says that. I think it would be really cool. Even more so than that, though, the Council of Reeds. That's a really interesting part of the Hickman run that I would love to see. I mentioned earlier in this video the Things Kids, the Skrull, and the Kree. That would be something really interesting. We've already kind of set that up for the MCU in some level. But there's some other things that I would also like to see. But these are all major things that I think would make a really cool addition. I hope we see more of the Future Foundation more accurate to the comic version in general. Like the suits would be really cool. I love the Future Foundation suits. Either way, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to smack that like button. I know it was a little bit longer, but I would be interested in doing more bigger reviews like this one for future movies, not just Marvel, but of anything. So if it's something that you enjoyed, make sure you let me know, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye, guys.